All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about how fiat is the original scam, and this meme perfectly sums it up. We're going to go deeper into it, but I'll just read it out to you here. The US dollar looks like an S coin from crypto's perspective. 27 trillion in circulation, unlimited supply cap, only one node, 1% of holders own 30%, 25% of the supply minted in the last 6 months. I'll say it's probably worse than that now, actually. 38 million notes printed every day, loses at least 3% of value every year in a bear market since its conception. What do you guys think about this? I think that's hilarious and incredibly accurate, and also kind of sad too when you think about how important the US dollar is to people.
Yeah, I
It's
completely agree. People will do whatever they can to defend the US dollar. Like they'll tell you, no, it's better. It's not going away. And they actually get angry when you tell, like when I post about the US dollar being a scam, people get angry for whatever reason.
it's funny to see like the different celebrities who have come out with their own meme coins, and Trump would be one, Hawk Tuo would be another. Dave Portnoy's been trading meme coins, and people get so upset about it. But if you had just objectively compared like a meme coin to, as we just showed there, the currency that we use every day, they're not too different. Actually, the meme coins might actually have a little bit more value there, which is kind of bizarre. But I mean, so where do we want to take this, boys? Do we want to just like compare it to Bitcoin? Do we want to go, compare it to other assets, or what are we thinking here?
Let's compare to Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I think the way that I see it, Bitcoin is it's like an investment against fiat. So Forrest, can you share that chart of yours, the one with the US dollar value?
Yeah.
The way that I see it, the way that I see it, Bitcoin is just a investment against this. So Bitcoin's going to perform the opposite way.
Okay. So yeah, so here we have another chart that I posted. A dollar's worth of purchasing power. So you can see here it's systematically going down in purchasing power versus all of these goods, right? This is what's important to people: is what can you buy with this money, or currency is probably a better term for the US dollar. And you can see it's devalued against all of these simple things like a bar of chocolate, oranges, grapefruits, whatever. And if you look at this chart versus Bitcoin, it's even worse, because Bitcoin is so much more valuable than any of these things. It outperforms even the rising costs of all of this. And this part here on the chart, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. The US money supply grew by 3.8 trillion in 2020. I think this is fundamentally the biggest problem, is that the supply of money can grow, and the fundamentals, the first thing you learn in you know uh, about the economy or about money, or markets, is supply and demand. And when the supply increases in the dollar, and the demand stays, exactly the same, or it might fluctuate a little bit, but for this sake of the argument, we can say it stays the same. The supply grows, that means that there's more of it, and that the value of it has to go down compared to everything else. It's really that simple, and it costs absolutely nothing. They don't even print these things physically. A large portion of this 3.8 trillion dollars of supply growth of money is printed digitally with the clicks of a button when credit is created at a bank. So it's just, there's no proof of work, there's no real cost to the creation of this money, and it's a major problem for anyone holding the US dollars. And one last point before I toss it to you guys: the US dollar is probably the best fiat currency out there. So if you look at this and you think this is bad, look at your own nation's currency if you don't live in America. I know the Canadian dollar is doing even worse, right? We're all Canadian here. It's doing even worse than this. So this is bad, but the rest of the world is even worse. So we need something like Bitcoin. When people say there's no use of Bitcoin, what's the use case? This right here is the use case. It's to protect you against this.
I think it ties. I think it ties into how easy it gets to make things as well, right? Like as we get better with technology, it becomes easier to make dollars based on what you said there. They used to be paper, now they're digital. So digital is much easier to create more of. Bitcoin is the only thing that's digital that you can't easily create more of because of proof of work. Because these dollars don't have proof of work, it'll get easier and easier. Like that number at the bottom there, the $3.8 trillion that they printed over the last, what was it, 2020?
Yeah.
Is that one that, yeah, that's one. So that number is going to be a rounding error. Like they're going to be printing 3.8 trillion a year at some
Yeah.
point. And it'll just accelerate. Like the value that you have in your currency, it's going to keep decreasing. It's not going to slow down.
Yeah, that was actually for the year 2020,
Oh,
and
for the year. Wow.
yeah, and that's because of, all the stimulus that they did for the year 2020. If we think back at the world events that was happening back then, but this is all to pay also for the previous misuse of money by the government, by the U.S. government, right? Like the inflation that the savers of these currencies are experiencing is because of previous spending. Like the U.S. government is probably still paying for the war in Iraq. Like like that was out of their budget to do that war, and they did not raise the taxes to pay for that war. They did not sell war bonds directly to people. If they issued debt, the Federal Reserve bought that debt, or the vast majority of it. And when they buy debt like that, it's creating new money out of thin air.
Yeah. I think it cost something like $8 trillion. That's crazy. It's just
Yeah.
crazy.
It's wild to me to look at a chart like that and just how horrifying it is for people to. It's a good visual, of course. Like people see that, they're like, okay, well, the dollar in 1913, I have 1% of the purchasing power now. I think that's what people need to be paying the most attention to, is not what Bitcoin's worth, not what this asset's worth. It's how much purchasing power you have. That's the only thing that matters within a currency. And I think if you look back to 1913 and that chart that we were just looking at, that is best case. We have to remember that too. That is best case, because the people who are in charge of creating the money, the Federal Reserve, they were created in 1913. And do you guys know how many times the Federal Reserve has been audited since then?
Probably
0
none.
times.
Never.
Yeah.
0 times. So that we're just kind of taking their word for it. That's why I'm saying that's the best case scenario, that we've lost 99% of the purchasing power in the dollar. That's best case. It might be way more than that. We have no idea who they're paying. There's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes, as most people know, especially at that level of power. But yeah, it's crazy to me. And I think about somebody like my dad, who worked 40 years in a job. And I know that there's a lot of baby boomers out there who kind of went through the same thing. Worked 40, 50 years at a job. They had a good pension. They were looking forward to retirement. My dad retired in 2019. And I think that his retirement, it looked a lot different in his eyes versus what it is today, because that was right before they turned on the money printer. And since 2020, they printed 40% of the total money supply that has ever existed. So somebody like that, somebody who did everything that they were supposed to according to society, they were looking for. I didn't think my dad would ever have to think about money again. But because of the amount of money that they printed, because of the how much they've devalued his net worth, it's crazy to me. And it's crazy to me that people are taking this long to kind of figure out what's going on here, when you have a very clear alternative here, which is Bitcoin. And the thing that's keeping people away from Bitcoin is their lack of understanding it. That's it.
Yeah.
If you ask anybody why they don't own Bitcoin, it's not because they have a really good understanding of it. It's because they don't understand it. That's the disconnect here. So I want to, sorry, go ahead, Rajat there.
I was just going to say, tied into what you were saying there, like if somebody is, let's say, based on that chart that you showed before us, let's say your grandparents or your great grandparents did a job in 1913, and I was watching this video. I don't know why it came up on my feed, and there's basically this guy who was cleaning a carpet, and he was talking about how this carpet was made 120 years ago, and it's made of this really great material. It's held itself up through that 100 years or so, whatever, 120 years. But the person who created it, they made it by hand. Whatever they got paid in, they don't have that anymore. Let's say they passed it on to their kids, their grandkids, their great grandkids. They don't have that anymore because it's worth nothing, right? Let's say, for example, the carpet cost $20 back then. Today, that same carpet's probably worth $2,000. So whoever got that carpet from them, they got real value, but then the person who created the carpet, who put in their time, energy, effort, all of their labor, all of their skills towards creating that carpet, their family gets nothing out of it unless they spend it right away. And that's the incentive here. The goal is to get people to spend as soon as you possibly can, so that the value of the money keeps decreasing. That's the goal here. The goal is to make sure that people don't hold onto the currency and they keep contributing to the GDP. The artificial numbers that we've already come up with, it's just it's insane. Like the fact that we've fallen for this for so long, and we're
But why
probably going
is
to
that though?
continue.
Let's dive into that a little bit, because why do you think the government wouldn't want people saving money? That because that's essentially what they're saying here. They want you to spend your money as fast as you can. That's what most people do. You know,
Yeah.
you go to a job, you get $250 left over after your month. People usually spend that because they don't value it at all. But why would the government want to force people to spend and turn them against actually saving money and being able to save money? Like, why is that?
There's a few things, but I think one of them is that the government and the people connected to the government, like the Federal Reserve, they want the power to be able to spend themselves.
Hmm.
So they want a currency that they control. It's about power in that way, and there's a knock-on effect of creating this currency we have, this fiat money that is becoming worth less and less, and the knock-on effect of that is people spending it more. I'm not sure the government wants people to spend it. I mean, they probably do because it juices their numbers, right? It creates artificial GDP rising, but that's just in line with the fiat money creation. Like the monetary debasement is part of the GDP of a nation, and people don't disconnect those numbers. So maybe there's a reason there, but I think it's more so the fact that the government wants to be able to spend without discretion.
I guess it kind of dilutes their numbers if we spend more. Is that what you mean?
Well, I think the other thing too for me with the government, this is my opinion on this, is I have a very conspiracy mind. But like if the government doesn't allow their citizens to save any money, then they essentially continue, as Forrest said there, to hold the power there. Because if people start saving and all of a sudden they can actually do things that they couldn't before, that takes away the influence and the power of the government.
Yeah.
When people are kind of desperate and begging and just fighting for scraps, they're powerless.
It's
And that's kind
capital
of where most
control.
people are right now. And that's why I'm so excited about the future that we're going into in terms of like Bitcoiners and people having real assets that they can hold on to themselves and have zero counterparty risk there. Because when people have money and wealth, then they start to get power and influence, and they can actually start influencing the direction of the world and society. And that's just something that's been stripped away from people for decades.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is freedom money. The government is really worried about capital control. With Bitcoin, there's people say it's censorship resistant, it's permissionless. Well, what does that mean? It means that basically it can't be frozen. It means that you can use it and no one can stop you from using it. So if you put all of your wealth in Bitcoin, and the government that you're in, which this is very realistic, we live in a very privileged place in the world, but governments can become very tyrannical very easily. And we've seen instances of that even in our own country. And that's up for debate depending on how you view it and all this. But say it gets really bad, right? All you need to do is memorize 12 words, or encrypt 12 words somehow, bring that with you, leave the country for some reason, and stay out of that country. You can bring your wealth with you. If it was in a bank account, if it was in fiat terms, you need permission to access that. You always need permission to access that. If you hold fiat dollars, you need permission to spend that too. With Bitcoin, you don't. You can do that. All you need to do is pay the miners some fees, to get included in the next block, and you can transfer wealth.
Yeah.
So it's pretty powerful. Bitcoin. That's the freedom go up, right? Is the more people acquire Bitcoin, the more they realize we actually have some power here as individuals.
It's also the fact that if they have money that we can or if we have money that they can control, they can stop us from doing things that they don't want us to do. Right? So let's say
Exactly.
if you're going to protest about something and they don't like it, they can just freeze your bank account.
And freezing a bank account is devastating. Like
Yeah.
that means you can't go to work because you can't fill your gas tank. If you have children, it means you can't feed them. You have to rely on other people. You have to say, hey, like I can't access my money. My mortgage is coming due. Can you help me out? Who has, enough money to be able to fully help somebody else pay their entire living expenses? Like it's a terrible situation. It's worse
Yeah.
than it. In some ways, it's worse than going to jail, because in jail, you have your necessities met. When you
Yeah.
have your
That's a
bank
good
account
point.
frozen, you can't provide the necessities of life anymore.
I didn't even think
Yeah.
about it that way. That's wild.
Yeah, that's deep. That's what Bitcoin protects you against, right? Like the people the people who don't trust their government are the ones who are going to buy Bitcoin, and then the government is going to hurt the people who trust them.
Yes.
So this
Yeah.
is the opposite at that point. So like the people who don't trust the government are just being proactive, and they're trying to see where their government's going to go, where their government's going to stop them from spending what their government doesn't want them. Like let's say, for example, in 10 years, if we have a CBDC, that's going to be the US dollar's replacement, I think, if it happens. If you buy too much meat, are they going to stop you from buying more? Like, are you going to be, if you don't have, look, based on what the World Economic Forum is doing, the WDEF, they want us to eat these bugs. If you don't get enough bugs in your diet, are they going to freeze your accounts? Like, that's the scary part.
It's pretty dystopian, but it is a possibility. And
Yeah.
I see a lot of positivity of us moving in the opposite direction, but it's because of people like us. It's because of Bitcoiners. It's because of the grassroots movements against that. But, there's a lot of people that would like it to go in a very different way, like you're talking
Yeah.
about, which sounds horrible to me.
Yeah.
I just want to go back to something that Rajat was talking about there. If somebody's grandparents or great grandparents went to work for a day or did a job or even a week, and they had some money left over, and maybe they thought that they would put it aside. I mean, at that time, you have to keep in mind that a lot of people did not trust the banks in that specific era. We've kind of been programmed and brainwashed into thinking that, these people are our friends, our allies. But going back to that, like a lot of people didn't even hold the cash in the 50s and 60s and before that. But if they did, imagine somebody at that time, they went to work for a year, they maybe had $1,000 left over, which would have been a lot at the time. If they just held that in a savings account or in their safe or under their mattress, fast forward 70 years, how much is that $1,000 worth now compared to what they could have purchased from it then? That's just the devaluing dollar. That's all it is. When you when a small group of people has the ability to print money, that's what happens. They do it. But I want to bring up a couple different things here. Forrest, can you bring that original meme back that we had right off the start? Because I think we should actually compare that to Bitcoin. But I think that people should have some sort of sense of urgency here in terms of kind of where we are with Bitcoin right now. This is a spreadsheet, a very simple one I did, and I want to just buzz through this quickly. But we talked about people going to work and how much their purchasing power is actually impacted by the money that they're saving in. So if you look back to, let's just use 20,000. This was only 2 years ago within Bitcoin. The price was $20,000 per Bitcoin. So I'll maybe put that at the top so it's easy for people to see here. But so let's focus on this. You went to work, you did a job, and the job paid you, say, $500, whether it was just like a contract work or you had $500 left over after your expenses, and you put that into Bitcoin. That was 2 years ago. You would have got 2.5 million sats. Today, we're at about 105 right now. So you go to work, you do the exact same work, you do the exact same job, exact amount of energy that you exert. Today, you're getting 476,000 sats for the exact same work. So Bitcoin's going the opposite of what we were talking about in fiat there. It's going the opposite direction of that. And so let's say that within this cycle, there's a lot of people calling for $250,000, $500,000 Bitcoin. You go to work again, the exact same job, you're in $500. That now gets you 200,000 or 100,000 sats. So that, and it's going to keep trending that as the price of Bitcoin in fiat terms continues to go up, the energy and the value that you add to the world, you're just going to get less for it.
Yeah.
Which is, again, the exact opposite movement of the fiat there. Do you guys have any comments on that?
I think it's going to accelerate even more too. Like It's, we see nation states talking about adopting strategic states. All the Bitcoiners on Twitter, they're, a lot of them are very ecstatic about that. They love that. To me, I just see that meaning that I'm going to earn less for the work that I'm doing because Bitcoin's price is going to go higher, and I value my energy and time in something like Bitcoin that can traverse through time and hold its value, just as you showed there, and it's actually increasing in value because we're early in the adoption cycle still. So yeah, to me, it's like, I would rather governments not buy Bitcoin. I'd rather them not, I'd rather it, the grassroots adoption continue, because it means that Bitcoin's price will stay lower for longer. I'm in my earning years, and that means I can acquire more Bitcoin. But, it's nice to get your bags pumped as well. So I see the other
True.
side of it.
Yeah,
That's
you
why
can't
it's a
really stop
win-win.
anybody. I
No.
get a point. You can't stop anybody from buying. You can't stop MicroStrategy. You can't stop BlackRock. You can't stop government. Sorry, Jory, you're about to say something there.
I was just going to say that's why Bitcoin's such a win-win, is because if
Yeah.
you're holding an asset like Bitcoin,
Yeah.
it goes up, your net worth increases, you're feeling good. But when it goes down, the exact same value that you're providing to the world, you're actually able to accumulate more of what you want to earn in. So it's a
Yeah.
win-win for Bitcoiners.
So either
win-win.
your purchasing power increases or your savings increase.
Yeah.
Which to me is great.
Yeah, it's
So
perfect.
Let's maybe round this out. Just compare the shit coin that is fiat dollar to Bitcoin. We can kind of go line by line here, I think, and compare it to what Bitcoin is. Because I have this theory that if you actually took the average person and you didn't even mention the word Bitcoin to them, and you just looked at the characteristics of the currency that we use today, and you compare that to the characteristics of Bitcoin, it would be so obvious to them that this is a much better currency, a much better capital, collateral, everything.
Yeah.
But because Bitcoin carries such a negative connotation by design from the media, from the governments who don't want you to use Bitcoin. But let's go through this line by line, and I think it'll be pretty clear to people why they should be storing their time and energy in Bitcoin.
So the first
start
one,
at the top. Go ahead, Rajat.
yeah. First one, 27 trillion. How much Bitcoin is there in circulation? 19.8?
Something like that. I mean, with
19.7?
lost coins, there's a lot of that isn't circulating, but yeah,
Maybe like
we
16?
could start with that.
Yeah, maybe 16, 17 if you don't consider. Next one, unlimited supply cap, 21 million max. That's
Yep.
completely different. We called ETH a shitcoin because it has an unlimited supply cap. I call XRP a shitcoin because it has only it has a very limited number of nodes. And the US dollar is even worse. It's only one node.
One
Like
node.
go ahead.
Bitcoin has 20,000 active nodes. I mean, I'm running
Yeah.
one literally right now on this computer. There's around 200,000 not running, so they could just be activated within, a couple minutes.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I think the next one that's actually pretty crazy to me. 1% of holders own 30%. I think that's the only one that the US dollar is probably winning with, but that's only because most people haven't adopted Bitcoin yet.
Yeah, but so that's people, that's not of the world though. That's of people that are
Okay.
currently holding it.
Okay,
1%
that
of the
changes things. Yeah.
holders own 30%.
Yeah, like the
So
biggest holder. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, no. So I'm not sure exactly. I have to look it up. I don't have the numbers on me of that direct comparison with Bitcoin. I know Bitcoin isn't fully completely distributed either in a totally fair way, which is
Yeah.
part of, in a way that is fair because there was early adopters who acquired more of it for less cost. Yeah, so I don't know the exact comparison there.
I think publicly it would be that we know of anyways, other than Satoshi's wallet, which haven't moved in 16 years. There's just under 1 million coins in that wallet. But I think the second biggest holding of Bitcoin, I think, is MicroStrategy, which is 450,000 or 471,000 Bitcoin, which is about 2%.
2%.
Even BlackRock's Bitcoin, it's not actually theirs. It's their customers.
True.
So.
They're custodian. Yeah.
Yeah. So they got over 500,000 Bitcoin now, close to 600,000 Bitcoin. So those would be the two biggest holders. So they would own about 4 to 5% total combined. But the thing for me is that it's actually individuals own just under 70% of the total Bitcoin. Individuals, not governments, not big corporations, not hedge funds, but individuals own 70% of the Bitcoin today.
Yeah. And then the next one, 25% of the supply minted in the last 6 months. So in Bitcoin, we know exactly these are estimates. We actually don't know how much of the supply is being minted. These are just numbers that we're told. The
Yeah.
reality is that with Bitcoin, we know exactly the amount of Bitcoin being created. What was the supply last year? Or actually, what was the supply in the last 4-year period? Was it?
So when Bitcoin was historically, gold has been the most scarce asset in terms of
Yeah,
new supply coming onto the market, which is 2%. And when Bitcoin, the halving cycle of 2024, that officially passed gold in terms of being the most scarce asset. So Bitcoin would be less than 2% per year of new supply,
yeah,
and it's only going to go down from here.
Yeah.
yeah. Insane. 38 million notes printed every day, and we don't even know that that's true. We have no idea.
Yeah. I mean, if you guys look into the euro dollar system, there's a ton of US dollars being created that we have no track of.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
So
38 million notes printed every day. There's what, 450 Bitcoin per day
450,
being
yeah.
yeah.
mined?
450.
Yeah.
450, and that's getting decreased every single. So that's decreasing every day, while the U.S. dollar supply is increasing every day. Like it's accelerating versus decelerating.
Yeah.
Next one loses at least 3% of value every day, every year. Um,
That's on the
Bitcoin's
low
gaining.
side.
That's on the
Bitcoin's,
low side. Yeah,
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 loses at
and
least.
that's not even considering technological innovation. So
Right.
that's even higher. That's probably like 8, 9, 10%.
Right. Well, we
Right?
should live in a deflationary world based on, humans being deflationary and technology being deflationary. So
Yeah,
why do we have a money that's inflationary? It makes no
yeah,
sense at all.
I
exactly.
think that the part that I would add here is like if we say that fiat's losing 3% in this sense, Bitcoin's been on average 60% gaining 60% of value of purchasing power per year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and this 3%. So people might say, "Oh, yeah, Bitcoin loses value some years," but the thing is that Bitcoin will eventually gain that value back. This 3% is never going to come back.
Never.
You're never
Never.
going to get it back. That 3% is gone. It's gone forever. If we go back to that chart that you posted that you showed before, the 1913 value is gone. It's never coming back. You're never going to be able to buy 30 Hershey's chocolate bars for $1.
Never. No.
That's never going to come back.
What do you guys pay for your Hershey chocolate bars today?
Dollar
Ooh,
50.
at least. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
I
probably
think
a
it was
good
a
deal
dollar
now.
fifty. Yeah, that was like 5 years ago. I feel like it was $1.50. I can't
Dollar
find a
50.
chocolate bar for under like $3 here anymore.
And
Wow.
in a vending machines, yeah, it's going to be about 250. In a store, maybe you could get it for $1.50, right? Yeah, it
Yeah.
depends.
And you know what the worst part is? That Hershey's chocolate bar probably got worse over time.
Oh,
Yes.
big time. So
The
there's
ingredients.
shrinkflation as well with
Yeah. Like
the
back then it
not
was
just
probably
size,
100
but
grams.
yeah.
Back then it was probably 100 grams. Now it's like 40. So
And
Yeah,
crazy. So even worse.
the quality of ingredients probably dropped
Yeah.
significantly too.
big
Yeah.
time. They didn't have palm oil
Exactly.
back then, right? That was real, cacao butter. And then
Insane.
here, this goes into at least 3% every year. The next one leads into that in a bear market since conception. It's never been positive. We can look at that chart. We had it rose in value here in 1930s. Um, this is just a momentary blip though. Like this looking back, this almost means nothing really.
Hmm.
Like realistically. I don't know.
I think the reason why it actually went up to that point, actually, the reason why I think it started coming back down, it says at the top there, criminalizes the possession of gold.
Mhm.
I have a feeling that maybe the main reason for that is because there were bank runs,
Yeah,
as people saw,
that's
that
when
the.
they confiscated the gold. So when
Yeah,
people weren't able to hold gold anymore, they were forced to hold their wealth in dollars at that time.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, so that created a huge amount of demand for dollars, and then all of this probably coincided with a lot more imports from other
yeah,
places, so the purchasing power of the dollar goes up comparatively to the other currencies, which are importing a lot of these goods, and yeah, so even still though, like the purchasing power of the dollars is still going down, even with globalization and free
Technology.
trade and all technology, all of this, it's still going down over
this is
time.
this is that bear market. It's been in a
Yeah,
permanent bear market. Like it's gonna keep happening.
exactly.
It had one bull run in the 30s, but yeah, that's
Yes.
and I actually heard this the other day. I didn't know that this was a real thing, but I heard that Bitcoin is actually the only asset that has ever dropped more than 50%, crashed essentially in a bear market. We've seen 4 of them now, but it's crashed 4 times more than 50%, and it's come back to reach an all-time high. So
Yeah.
Bitcoin's the only one. So when people say it's a bubble, that's what usually happens. When it runs way up, it crashes. It never really recovers after that. And the US dollar would be a good example of that. But Bitcoin so far in 16 years has crashed down more than 50% and has come back to gain a new all-time high after that. So this thing's not going anywhere. It's just kind of figuring out what it's worth compared to everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why the comparison to the tulip mania is just so dumb, because that is a clear bubble. If the bubble bursts, the value of tulips goes down. It never
Exactly.
recovers. I
Yeah.
mean, you look at Bitcoin's chart, it fluctuates up and down. And then we look back and we see, hey, all of those big swings, that 30% down, that actually kind of looks like nothing now. So it's just in the short term that this volatility seems like is so intense and so crazy. But
Yeah.
if you just, if you just look away from the chart for a few days or a year even, you'll be totally fine. You'll be set.
Yeah.
Well, what an episode, boys! What a show that was. That was a little bit more than I was expecting when we started this thing. So, do we got any final words about this, or should we wrap her up?
Yeah, I actually wanted to say, with that last point that you made there, Forrest. So Bitcoin is year to date, Bitcoin is up 3.46%, but people are panicking.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you just look away for a bit, like if you looked away since the beginning of this year, you're up 3.4%. If you had $100 in Bitcoin, you made $3.46 because money was printed and added to the economy, and what you had increased in value.
Yeah. You sure wouldn't know that by looking at Twitter the last few
Yeah,
days. I mean,
exactly.
that was the whole reason for this tweet with the dollar's worth. The first thing I say, oh no, the thing that was worth 60K 2 months ago just fell to 94K.
Yeah,
Like, just put it in perspective, people. Like,
it crashed to 94K from
yeah,
60K.
exactly.
I think there's a lot of people out there who could use this video. We talked about the 99% of people who are still to come. So if you're watching this, if you enjoyed it, I would say just consider sharing it. We try to keep these videos fairly short for people to consume. So just send it to a friend. One thing that people have to have when they get into Bitcoin before they can see the value in Bitcoin, they have to have an open mind, and they have to have a good understanding of what we're comparing this against, of history. And so I think this is a very useful clip that you can send people. So consider, if you got any friends, coworkers, anybody out there, family members who you think should be getting some Bitcoin, just send them this video. So with that, thanks, fellas. We'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks, boys.